What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Apartment 113 podcast, where we talk with cool folks in the cannabis and psychedelics industry to learn about their projects and celebrate their successes. My name is Rob Sanchez, and this is episode 13. We're joined today by David Fluegel, a certified Ganjier and insightful cannabis advocate. David has a lifetime of cannabis experience and helps others to consume and cultivate a therapeutic relationship with the plant. Enjoy the show. David, welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you on, and I'm happy you could join me this a little bit early morning for me in Vegas, but you're up and rocking already.
Rob, it's great to have the opportunity to hang out with you again. I had a blast when we were in California doing our Ganjier certifications, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of what we're doing as Ganjiers, and as well as the opportunity to kind of uncover some of the mess we've made as a culture in the last 50 years.
Yeah. Before we started recording, we were just touching on that imprint on the psyche, the stigma of cannabis, that the Ganjier program is really doing their work to try and clear, or at least find advocates for clearing that. How did you find your way into the Ganjier world, or what was kind of your pre-legal cannabis industry experience?
Well, I was introduced to the plant when I was probably 17, so 30 years ago, and I initially initially it was something my friends and I did. It wasn't a big thing until I realized that it was the one thing that kind of helped me start calming myself down. I was an underachiever child of overachiever parents. My folks had me on a path for medical school and big things. I started taking the SATs in the 8th grade, and this is back in the 80s, mind you, before the focus on matriculation was really what it is today. It's a different cultural vibe, and I was a stressed out high school student.
It sounds like they were pushing you hard.
Yeah. I ended up in a high school program, Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts. It was one of the early iterations of the magnet schools, and it was a residential program.
Right.
So that was part of my introduction with the whole cannabis thing, because I finally found something that would calm me down. Now, unfortunately, I have a tendency to I'm a little bit of a serial hobbyist. When something interests me, I go down the rabbit hole pretty hard.
Oh, you and me both. So that's how it started, huh?
Yeah.
Learning more about cannabis and getting deeper.
I got excited about it when I got to college. I didn't do great at college, but I did great at cannabis. And the challenge was, later on down the road, the path that cannabis led me to, the people that it led me to, were some of the most exceptional human beings in my life. And I ran myself into a wall, essentially, going down the rabbit hole. I got myself in trouble with the law in Oklahoma and probably in the late 90s. And when the feces hit the oscillator, I remember sitting there going, if I can get out of all this shit, if I can get my shit sorted out, what I really would like to do is just, and mind you, this is in the hill country of Oklahoma. My big plan was to get some earth moving equipment and trench out some hills and back some. I knew where to get repurposed school buses. We were gonna build hydro setups in school buses buried under a hill.
Nice. I've seen the train car or the shipping container version of that. That's
We had access to surplus school buses, and I had some buddies in construction, so we were pretty comfortable with being able to reinforce them or structurally support them and still bury the suckers.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been quite an undertaking there, man. And
but by the time I did get clear of all the debris that my bad decisions had created, I actually was in recovery. I had to get myself clean, period, to get my head straight. I was a mess. I was a hot mess.
Just had to kind of clear the slate a little bit and reassess, huh?
I went to work for Panera Bread. When I got out, I actually ended up running their training department, which always tickled the shit out of me. I'm like, here I am, a glorious reprobate, and I'm teaching these kids how to adult. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
And,
helping them take their first steps into the company and helping everyone learn the ropes, huh?
hell, I trained managers. I mean,
Ah,
from top to bottom, I opened 19 stores for them.
wow.
I mean,
Okay.
when I got on board with Panera initially, I was kind of trying to get out of the restaurant business because I was over it. I mean, I'd done everything in the restaurants from 5-star dining to places you would not want to take your friends. I mean, I worked with Emeril Lagasse in the 90s. At his flagship restaurant. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't a star chef. I was a runner. I worked in the kitchen. It turned out that cannabis led me to his sous chef. We became very good friends, and he got me a job working for Emeril.
Wow, that's awesome. The connections there.
We're still buddies, man. I haven't.
Yeah.
I honestly have not kept in touch with Andre as well as I should have. He's out in New Mexico now, and honestly, from what I gather from a mutual friend, he's basically doing his thing as a cannabis chef and a cannabis consultant.
Wow, that's great. I know that I think it's New Mexico and Arizona that have like very open cannabis chef kind of laws. You can
Absolutely.
get infused pizzas and infused gyros and sandwiches, stuff that you can't quite get in Vegas yet.
They've allowed a lot more flexibility, I think, for the development of the landscape there. But that the Panera path, honestly, and as crazy as it sounds, going through recovery. I mean, hell, I chaired NA meetings for a lot of years, and I still consider myself in recovery. I'm 23 years clean as of last October. I'm cannabis active. I'm most assuredly cannabis active, but I'm not in addiction. And I'd be because addiction is not based on my understanding. Well, I'm gonna stay out of that rabbit hole.
That's a whole nother podcast episode.
It is, and it's an interesting one when you start to cross the lines with substance abuse disorder and cannabis as medicine. That's a whole crazy ass landscape by itself. But
it's a weird line to walk there, man, and on the moderation side and the understanding.
Well, and to quote St. Thomas Aquinas, moderation in all things, including moderation.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing when to moderate.
The Panera and NA, honestly, the precepts that they kind of helped reinforce in my in being an adult and living my life, whatever, growing up finally, are what led me to the Ganjier program. I started when I did get THC active. I did about 1.5 years, 2 years worth of research on CBD before I was even willing to step over that line, because I did not want to go back to what the life I had lived when I was in active addiction. I was a mess. I was an absolute mess.
Yeah. And so being able to do that research, though, you were able to find enough support or find the folks that you needed to connect and be willing to try it, huh?
Not just find the research, Rob. What I started to do, I started doing a little bit of research. It reminded me of a book I'd read years ago by a fellow named Jack Harrer. So I picked up another copy of that and said, I might need to go through this again. I started looking at not just the stories that were being told, but also the stories that weren't being told. I was fortunate enough to be coming back into the space in a time when there was legalization in almost half the states in the country, and so I was able to look at some things a little differently, most assuredly than I had 18 years ago, and it made some it kind of set it set a little bit of a fire under my ass.
Kind of seeing the new landscape or how the industry was getting started, planting these seeds.
I've always been a big fan of the homily, make it better, leave it better than you found it. I mean, I was a scout. I was a Boy Scout as a kid, man, and that's what they taught us. You go in the woods, leave it better than you found it.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't mean build a fucking bird bath. Sorry, pardon my language.
All good.
But,
I think that I didn't make it to the Eagle Scout level, but I was working my way up that ladder for a while.
Life. I made it to life. I did not complete Eagle because I ran out of time. I mean, I was also having fun and actually doing the things that scouting is about, not just chasing the merit badges.
Right. Yeah. There's some perseverance at the end of that path. But there are some great lessons to learn there about nature and hobbying, figuring things out for yourself on the craft side and the hobby side.
The world, treating those people with respect. And even though the Scout or as an organization has gone through some pretty awful shit, but I mean, let's be honest. That is based on the actions of some individuals who made bad decisions and did terrible things. That's not based on the guiding precepts of an organization that's helped a lot of folks become better humans.
Yeah, totally. I can respect that. I came up through Scouts and didn't have any issues with with anything, man. Selling popcorn and doing pine car derbies, going camping.
No. I mean, worst
hanging out.
situation we had in Scouts was when our Scoutmaster decided we needed to work for our dinner. So we were on a weekend camp out. He opens up the back of his truck, said, "You boys hungry?" I said, "Hell yeah, we're hungry. Look at us." He opens a cage and about 20 chickens dive out and head into the woods. He says, "You better catch your dinner, son."
Oh, man.
I wish the hell we would have had video cameras back then. And honestly, I wish I'd had a big doobie because that would have been a blast.
It's so funny. Yeah. Watching 12 kids run after their chickens in the forest.
It was madness. It was absolute madness, dude. One guy got knocked out. He was trying to chase chicken under a tree, nailed himself right in the head. It was Adam Sandler level idiocy.
Yeah. I could just picture running around with that music, that kind of slapstick music.
And that was, honestly, that was initially some of the guys from my scout troop, those were the guys that I initially was introduced to cannabis with. So, that association for me wasn't, I went to a dark alley and I had to score some weed. It really was an organic part of growing up for me.
Yeah.
And, when I circled back to it 18 years later, I was able to start, and I mean, look, to keep myself clean, to keep my own head out of my ass, I'd reinforce some stigma, I guess, on myself. And
just to kind of keep yourself back in line or make sure you didn't step over and get
putting up
into
artificial
extremes.
guardrails to help me learn how to act like an adult.
There's probably some argument for that and the validity there, at least in the beginning or at least during times of change or indecision.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's some of it is, as a human being, our brain's the most powerful tool we have. Period. It is also the one we understand how to use the least. And we spend our entire lifetime from point A to point B trying to figure out where somebody put the fucking direction book.
Right, searching around, thinking we've got it straight, and then realizing we've been going in the wrong direction.
Licking toad butts.
Yep, that's the far ends of the spectrum right there.
So the guardrails.
Yeah, exactly. So the time spent training and like dealing with corporate rules, corporate process definitely does something for folks. I mean, I've been in the corporate realm before and I know that meeting process. Yeah, there's something about it though that helps you to roll out process or implement organizational change though outside of that. That's kind of a hidden benefit, you think?
It absolutely. Well, Rob, I mean, perspective-wise, as a director of training for Panera, I was pretty much ass deep in every development initiative we had. I worked for a franchisee, but we were considered, at least according to what they told us, we were considered one of the top operating franchises in the country, especially in our size range. We weren't a big ass franchise. We were kind of a mid-size, but operationally we nailed it. I mean, we were one of the reasons Panera had the reputation they did. I mean, and part of that was focus on guest service. Making sure that you put first things first, making sure that you can't make a product any better than your inputs. So Panera went upstream and started sourcing inputs that were levels of scale beyond what you would walk into a competitor and get. I mean, at one point they did some supply chain stuff that was so innovative, the chief supply chain officer was getting industry awards for it.
So they were really pushing the envelope on restaurant experience or on food and training.
Fresh dough coming into those cafes every day. They had to have an infrastructure in place to make, portion, and deliver this dough and get it there in temperature control. Otherwise, your dough's shot. And so, when the logistical undertaking that was involved there was
quite a supply chain.
Was ridiculous. But the crazy part was, I kind of grew up inside that Panera concept as it grew. So that was kind of the way my brain was being molded, if you will. And coming out of that, when we did store openings. So when we were doing brand new, when we were opening new cafes in South Louisiana, as an example, the goal was not to, hey, let's get this place open and start making some money. The goal was always about introducing ourselves. And that was why I stayed with Panera as long as I did. When they started shifting gears and the accountants took over, I started looking for something else because that did not align with who I am, and it wasn't consistent. And
I see. Yeah, the numbers start to take control of the business a little bit more than the passion or any virtue that was there.
but between my, starting to be kind of, THC active again and cannabis active, looking at CBD notably, especially, I'm a huge advocate of the CBD CBG piece of the puzzle, because as much as I love THC, we as a culture really don't do a great job balancing the scales in general.
Yeah, THC is easy to go out of balance. Just
It's on
turning the
demand.
fire hose on the endocannabinoid system.
Speaks to our demand for immediate gratification.
Yeah, right.
And honestly, given that we didn't really have any scientific methodology available at the time, it was what we knew about. Hey, this makes me feel better. I can cope with all the bullshit that life inevitably comes up with during the course of a given 24-hour cycle. This makes it easier. Give me some of that. So
yeah, it was pretty like common knowledge, or just more like street science street understanding.
And you had breeders out there that, legitimately were trying to apply things like, Punnett squares and Mendeleev type breeding, genetic scaling to their projects. You had a lot of guys out there that were just going, man, that's some good shit. Let's do that again.
This one smells great.
And some of them intuitively were doing amazing things. And some of them, scientifically were doing amazing things. And some of them, in both cases, were doing, absolute garbage. But, that's the path.
I think some of that garbage made its way to Kansas while I was younger.
It did. It did. It damn sure made it down to Louisiana, man. And I'm not sure if it came in on top of or under the river, but it came in.
Yeah.
But we started to, as we started to open up the landscape, and God bless Dr. Mishulam, it hurt my heart to hear that he passed, but
he really started that drive and was able to take those tentative steps into legitimate cannabis research. Yeah, it's wild.
He was he opened up so many paths for people to start looking into the window and start looking and going, okay, well, maybe what I was told wasn't accurate. His research on the on the ECS set the groundwork for everything that's happening today, basically. So
isn't it pretty strange that we didn't know about a bodily system for so long, like the respiratory system, the endocrine system, and then it's like, oh, the endocannabinoid system. What a record stop, right? Record scratch.
The hilarious part to me is the fact that it's named after the plant because we found it so fucking late.
Right.
We found the plant first, so we had to name it.
Yeah, we had to name the endogenous cannabinoids, so the ones created within the body and for the system. I think like Mishulam also coined the and Mishulam discovered, or one of his labs discovered an anandamide.
And I think 2AG as well. I think they did all the groundwork on that.
It's definitely like a monumental figure for cannabis science and cannabis history, coining the entourage effect, just really rolling out some of these terms that we're still trying to figure out today from a scientific perspective.
To take that one step further, Rob, coining the term started to give us the language to have the conversation, and that as pedantic as that may sound, that's huge.
Yeah, right. You can't quite critique something or really discuss it thoroughly without having the vernacular or be ready to use that language. Huh?
Have a cohesive conversation if you don't have a common means of communication, and having terminology, language. It's all part of that landscape.
Right.
And I know.
Have you heard of linguistic relativity?
I haven't, but I love the idea.
It's a trippy idea, man. The thought behind linguistic relativity is that when I say these words right now, they're shaped with my past experiences, my intent, my understanding of the English language. I'm just hoping that your understanding is close, and that's like a gap that we're always crossing. And it's interesting thinking about that if you ever have trouble communicating with somebody, kind of what's being missed in between the lines.
But that's where the value comes in cultivating relationships, because if you're going to have that conversation, at their core, all relationships are extended conversations. Period. That is what a relationship is. It is a series of extended conversations over a time frame. And that creates a shared reality, if you will, that
builds that stage where the norms are established. Man. Yeah.
So when you're talking about a certain set of things, that initial that precursor conversation is already in play. So, and that's part of the reason you see it, that it's pursued so aggressively, I think, in the corporate or the business structure world. Why terminology becomes so, becomes so precise, because they're trying to make sure they minimize the potential for gap when there's money involved.
Yeah, they're trying to reduce that linguistic relativity as best they can.
And there's
Maybe not always for the best.
well, there's value in that when you're trying to do life on scale. If you're trying to live life on life's terms, it's a little easier to make time for the conversations generally.
Right. Find out those gaps on your own and connect. Yeah, the corporate jargon can it never ends. I'm part of all kinds of like agile and product management kind of initiatives, and in that world there's so much jargon that they're ready to throw down as the guidelines. But kind of what you were saying, even on life, they really are just the guidelines. It's a framework. And after you understand that, some of the jargon can go away. But because now you have that in your vernacular or in your experience, you're working differently, and you can have a different conversation about a sprint goal or about agility in software. And it does actually work, as dry or pedantic as it could be.
No, it completely works, because in that context, it's used as an effective, specific, and surgical tool that allows you to go from point A to point B with no gap. So, I mean, in context, life is a performance art, and tools like Agile help you to take that art into a different vector. You're able to use different paint colors, different tools, different sound. You know what I'm saying? You're able to bring different things into it because you've expanded your range, if you will. And
yeah, totally. I can see that, and I can also see where then the connection here to some of the Ganjier education and consumer education comes in just trying to increase the vocabulary or increase the awareness behind the effects, flavor, aroma. Yeah, I think that before the Ganjier program, I was definitely regularly consuming. I was deep in the cannabis industry, loving the industry and kind of where we are so far. But I had not
knowledgeably
actually
on it as well, I would imagine. I mean, I would imagine that prior to the Ganjier experience, you could still speak pretty knowledgeably on cannabis in a broad array of things.
Yeah, I think I was relatively well read there. I had cultivated in Denver, I'd created some hash for a while, tried some home cultivation and things like that. But I wasn't really looking at individual effects. That's something that I really took away. Like I was medicated, or I would consume, roll a blunt, take a bong hit, and be good to go. And then I think the Ganjier program helped to take a look at that from more of a connoisseurship perspective, or try to look at it from a more of like a point of intrigue, not like, okay, now I've consumed, let's go on with the next task, but more like, okay, now that I have, like, how's that different? Where's the effects coming from, or how's it feeling?
It added another dimension to your cannabis experience.
Yeah, I think that's a good way.
And although I am a huge Doctor Who fan, don't get me wrong, and I don't want to get all timey-wimey, but if you think of dimensions of perception, all right, we've got sensory perception that's kind of happening in the here and now. But if you take that a step back into your head, the way that you perceive your cannabis experience now is, I would arguably say, probably 2 or 3 levels deeper as far as depth of understanding and what you're looking at. I mean, you get a bud in your hand now, beyond just looking at kind of cursory glance and looking at the trim, how looking at the density of the bud, how's the color look, trichome coverage, etc. I mean, a lot of that's, you can snapshot that. You can look at that and go, "Ooh, that's good." Give it a sniff. You're like, "Hey, I like that." But now,
just trying to see that whole supply chain roll backwards, or like imagine where it came from.
You're looking at the bud. You're checking the spring back on it now. You're starting to think about the cure. Based on that quick sniff you took, you're thinking about whether it's persistent or not. You're starting to go, is that hanging around in my nose, or was it a quick hit? Was it a one and done? You're asking more whys, and I don't know if in any of the agile stuff that they were talking about the 5 whys, but those
Right.
I always had to laugh when they'd have us teaching these leadership initiatives or development initiatives, because I was certified to teach like Franklin Covey stuff at one point, but none of these cats are inventing a damn thing. the 5 whys, whatever variation on the theme you want to talk about, they're just reframing things that are pretty much common sense, make sense to all of us. And when it's presented to us in a new way, we go, oh, hell, now I get it. Shit, yeah. It's like the first time you understood algebra.
Yeah, yep, or like learning the rules of a game. If you're watching a board game or something, or watching someone play a computer game, it just seems like chaos. But then you sit down and learn the rules of that game, or the guidelines, or how to talk about it, and suddenly okay, I know exactly what raid we're in, or how this is working.
It's like and again, they're cannabis brings another dimension into the game, though, because of effects. You've talked about the connoisseurship thing a couple of times, and I'm keep in mind I'm random as hell. I kind of ascribe to the Eddie Izzard school of conversational kung fu, which means you start in one place, you go in a big circle, face a lot of directions at various points in time, and try to end up in the same place at the end.
Yeah, if listeners haven't realized, I typically ask a single question on these interviews, and we just tangent out into everything else. Yeah, so all good there, man. I dig it.
But the thing is with cannabis connoisseurship, think about beer and wine as examples. Beer and wine have absolute sensory gustatorial experiences that are part of the enjoyment of a great product. And they will get you drunk, no doubt about it. Okay, you consume enough of them, you're going to be drunk. But there's really not a lot of differences in drunk. I mean, a whiskey drunk, I usually have to punch them in the face because they get fucking mean. But other than that, there's not. I mean, drunk is drunk. I mean, it's levels. I'm kind of drunk. I'm drunk. Has anybody seen my underwear?
Yeah.
Whereas world of difference with cannabis.
Right. As much as you could diagnose the nuance of like the grain bill in different whiskeys, or in creating rye versus a whiskey,
that's a gustatorial experience. That is not an effect.
Yeah, like you're sitting there sipping that. It's going to be the same feeling as the prior night, and the next night, and the next night, and that consistency kind of, I think, moved the public away from looking at some of these things as a point of change, as a point of potential change, just expecting that utility or almost commodification of the effect.
Some of it's because it requires a little bit of effort, dude. I mean, think about this. As a species, we've gotten pretty friggin' lazy. We're used to being spoon-fed mass media hype. The coolest thing is whatever they told us the coolest thing is this week. And, we've been conditioned to that. I mean, that's the same reason the stigma has hung around as long as it has. Because we've been conditioned to believe it.
Yeah, it's not surface level at this point anymore. It's been been covered by other sediments and it kind of forms the bedrock of everything.
Effective medication requires personal investment. I mean, you have to spend. I mean, candidly, have to spend a little bit of time figuring some stuff out. And that doesn't mean you have to become a Ganjier to take care of your meds. It does mean you have to connect with either do the research in reputable sources. Or ideally connect with somebody who can guide you to those sources and help you find the specific, instead of you having to wade through all of it yourself. If they can guide you to it, and that's part of what the Ganjier's role is.
Kind of starting to build that bridge, or be a few beacon lights in the fog, a lighthouse on the coast.
Absolutely, I mean, as the landscape starts to unfold with psychedelics, as an example. There's going to be tremendous opportunities for folks and guide is a great term there. They're going to be absolute, they're going to be professional psychedelics, psychologists that are involved with it. But that's also one of those landscapes where there's going to be, genetically, I'm part Cherokee and part Italian, so I'll make you an offer you can't understand. But and I know intuitively that the call towards, and I don't want to sound any crazier than I am, but that call towards shamanism, that call towards a spiritual path has been something in my life that has been present since I was a teenager, and that's probably why I didn't go to medical school. I mean, hell, I had a partial scholarship to Johns Hopkins.
Okay, so really had to take a different direction or take your own way, find your own path there.
It was nut up or shut up time.
Yeah. On the psychedelics front, man, I'm optimistic. I feel very positive about that becoming more mainstream. I definitely dabbled in the psychedelic realms for a while, and I've not so much these days. But I'm not.
They're going to have to be careful, and they're going to have to be very mindful with the guardrails for it.
Exactly. That's my concern. It's just too easy to go just rocketing off the street.
Case in point, and I'm not trying to put anybody out on Front Street, so I'm going to generalize this part of the conversation.
Yeah.
But my, somebody who's very important to me deals with PTSD, and unfortunately, they are in a situation where their livelihood precludes any cannabis use, and because of that, they more or less have turned to ethanol as a solution. And it's not ever. And, they're very excited about the idea of psychedelics, especially, psilocybin as a microdosing, notably, for dealing with it. But here's the challenge, and I mean, I personally have a pretty damn decent bit of personal experience with psychedelics from the time. I mean, that was the other thing I truly, truly loved besides cannabis. I just, psychedelics are something you can be
altering the
fire.
Reality. Yeah. I used to think about it kind of like I want to walk next to the abyss. I don't want to look in it, but I'm going to walk next to it. I'm going to feel those vibes and really take that message home. I got dangerously close a few times, it feels like.
I agree, but those are some of those experiences are some of what taught me who I am and priorities. I mean, those are part of the those experiences are probably part of the reason that I'm a terrible businessman. I'm an exceptional human being, in my opinion, and I've been told so by others. And I just really try to be the person that my dogs think I am. But
that's a good mission we should all try to accomplish.
I'm a terrible businessman. I tend to value human beings more than I value currency in general.
Yeah, I've seen that a similar approach from folks that come through the kind of psychedelic underbelly, getting into the product management side. I've been in companies that we're making a product that's supposed to do a thing. And as the product manager, I realize it's not. So I start a whole path towards fixing it and trying to rectify that identity crisis. Lo and behold, other stakeholders, board members, people with the money, they don't really care for that parity. And I've seen the headbutting there. I think it could come from microdosing or from some other experiences, just kind of opening up the purview and like connecting more with humanity and the world, things like that.
My biggest concern with the advent of the psychedelics and microdosing, without getting too far down the rabbit hole, is specifically if people are giving access to a tool without any information on how to use that tool effectively or any guidance or support in using that tool effectively, it's going to cause more problems, not fewer.
Yeah, and that's where I have a hard time sounding like super positive about the industry. But I mean, I am optimistic and I have really good feelings about it, but I worry
I'm totally conflicted about it. My inner child is like, woo, shrooms! And my inner adult is like, oh, yeah, that...
That can just go south for people. And I mean, seeing the party scene and the bass music scene right now is like a modern revamp of like Woodstock. People think that they're living in this psychedelia world, it's gone. At times, it's wonderful. I can't speak higher about it, but at times it is a little insane. Like someone is on like 10 hits of acid and 2 points of Molly, and then they're eating handfuls of shrooms and running through the forest, and it's like, this is a very great experience for you, I'm sure, but it could potentially be just devastating.
Yeah. I mean, on a side note, I recently saw some, and it was just kind of a blurb, but there's a group out there that is, if I'm not mistaken, and it's kind of being done on a sacrament level, so that they've got some, there's some legitimacy, I believe, to what they're doing. But they're actually feeding psilocybin mushrooms, I believe, an organic form of DMT to get a silomethoxin compound. And again, don't quote me on that, because I'd have to source it before I'd be willing to, But I mean, it's like, holy crap! I mean, why would you put your shrooms on steroids?
Yeah, that's a one up right there, man. And that's the curiousness and that constant competition of humanity. Like, we will discover whatever that uber psychedelic is that combines, ergo with the fungus of psilocybin and somehow is buffed up with DMT. I wouldn't be surprised if it's already on the way.
I'm a big believer in balance in general. I mean, it's going to be an interesting decade going forward from here. And I don't, the next 10 years are going to be an interesting period, I think. But,
One thing about it is like odd that how can a whole industry be built on psychedelics with the consumption patterns typically being, maybe you want to jump
erratic.
in, splash around on Friday. And maybe you'd microdose for a few months, but you're not going to be like splashing around every day, right?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, you're looking at it from a standpoint of a wellness perspective, and coming at it from. I mean, you're basically kind of coming at it from the same things that brought you into the Ganjier program. How do we use this to help people? What are some safe parameters for it? And what's a reasonable vector to bring to making this accessible? But that's not the corporate approach.
Yeah, the corporate approach is where's that money, and then the consumer approach is going to be like, how can I get jaded here? Pull up that anchor and fly away.
And I mean, all bullshit aside, Rob. Part of our job as Ganjiers is bridging that gap.
Right, kind of understanding that experience or understanding both perspectives and being a little bit of that
swamp
middle
tours.
piece. Yeah.
We'll get you through the gators to the other side where the crawfish boil's happening, folks. It'll be all right.
Get you through the mids over to the high terpene flower and outdoor.
Absolutely. It's going to be a slow process. It is. I mean, I know like some projects I'm working on right now. I've kind of taken a step back, and I'm working on creating a wellness journal template that I can share with folks. I mean, I work with a lot of folks locally and across the country as far as patients, and one of the things that anybody that I have conversations with, especially if they're a little less informed about cannabis, and they're like, I just want whatever's got the strongest THC. If they're amenable to a conversation, some people don't want to hear it. Some people are just like, yeah, just give me what I want and shut up.
It's not always the right time. Yeah, it's all good.
I'm not here to live their life for them. That's fine. If that, when they're ready, we'll have the conversation. When when they notice that the guy that was listening to me is doing twice as good as they are, they'll go, hey, what'd you give him? Well, funny you asked. Let's start with a little CBD, pumpkin. But it's pathing, and you can't force it. And if you're going to be true to who you are, you give people the space to come into, not open the door and say, get your ass in here.
Yeah, and I think even I forget that, talking about connoisseurship and trying to approach cannabis from this like different perspective, that it's really not the common approach right now. That's not how the general public is looking at cannabis. So, acting as that change agent, that was what they would call it in a corporate world, is it's definitely a flag to take up.
That's a beautiful point. When you say change agent, that was a huge initiative with Panera. We went through there was a lot of change management development, and it was a cascade process. We were bringing it down to the managers, because when I want to say it was when we were starting the drive-through and delivery portions of the business, that was just throwing a lot of people just a huge curveball. And when we started bringing some of those pieces into the cafes, we really did have to go in there and pre-fertilize. We basically had to put spiritual pre-emergent down.
You had to want it.
Because it's about helping people understand why they want it. Okay,
right.
I mean, because I know. I know why they want it. I sat in the meetings. I know what the advantages are. I know it's going to make my damn life easier. I know it's going to make your life easier, and your life easier, and your life easier. But right now, we got to move all this shit and clean some messes up to get to the easier part. We got to get through the gators.
Humans don't like change. Yeah.
No, we don't. But I mean, here's the thing. Forward is the path. You got to keep going.
Yep. Obstacle is the way. You run into something, just run into it harder until you're climbing over. Like that kind of stoicism approach is pretty good.
But we're pretty clever stoics, though. I mean, I'm not just going to run into it more than twice. If it doesn't, if I don't chip a piece of it off the second time I hit it, I'm working on another vector.
Start building a ladder.
Hey, either that, or if you spill enough milk on the ground and you get some really voracious cats, they'll tunnel right under that shit.
It's okay. There's some more life wisdom here from this episode. Yeah, and I think that the brands in general, both in the industry and outside of the industry, like Panera and other companies, are entering potentially a new stage with online education, easily online advertising. Folks are kind of inundated by quick online BS advertising.
We're
It feels like there's a push
conditioned
for
for it.
authenticity. Do you think that there's room for authenticity in how brands present themselves there?
I think it's critical. Well, and let me qualify that statement. I think it's critical for any brand that wants to be sustainable with integrity. Because if you're not authentic about what you're doing, let's use the and I don't want to cause any. Can we talk about the raw guy?
You're right. Yeah.
You know,
Quite a train wreck.
Well, and that kind of speaks to what you situationally. Here's a cat who was perceived as the most humble, grassroots, passionate, authentic guy in the OG weed world. I mean, everybody knew this cat. You know, and then come to find out that he had leveraged his position, well, allegedly leveraged his position to not only steal ideas, but also, bankrupt other brands, destroy their integrity, destroy their reputations. I mean, destroy their businesses.
Yeah, that's a bull in a china shop right there.
And that goes against everything that the cannabis space needs. If we're not collaborating, we're killing each other.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that Ganjier program brought was just the collaboration with these like-minded folks. Everyone kind of has that cannabis guy or gal in their group or in their circle who's a little more into it. And I think what the program did was bring us all together in the same room to just kind of talk shop and make this little stage of goodness here where everyone's kind of like-minded on that front.
We're kind of like the cultural equivalent of mycelial nodes. If you think of the energy continuum, the cosmos, whatever, as a giant, energy network, if you will, a mycelial network.
Right.
And to an extent, we are all connected. In the context of the cannabis space, Ganjiers can kind of act as those centralized nodes where their communities, their local communities, can coalesce to find the things that they need from that space. I mean, and much like a nutrient node in the mycorrhizae, when it's signaled by a plant, hey, I need iron, dog, and it tells the nematodes, hey, if y'all happen to be rolling around them nails over there, if you could pick up some of that shit and bring it back, I will trade you some really good sugar for it, and then we'll be cool. I mean, and that's the transaction that happens. I mean, it's probably a little more complicated than that. I don't know if they just go out to the iron we're going out to the nail yard. We'll be right back, boys. I don't think it's quite that cut and dry.
Yeah, same story, a few more chemical signals, but yeah, no, it is cut and dry though. If you think about society as kind of a mycelial network, or our ideas being able to perforate and spread through that same means.
In the context of the network of the Ganjier thing, kind of what I continue to see, at least especially in the classes, is better and better understanding of the network. We're starting to see a lot better collaboration going on there. I mean, it's part of the reason I was really thrilled when you hollered at me about doing the interview, because candidly, I'm just a guy. I know a guy, and I know some other guys. I mean, for what it's worth, my single claim to fame is I met Frank Sinatra in the '90s.
Okay, that's a little more than just a guy. That's just a guy who met Frank Sinatra.
But all that being said, I've had some crazy ass life experiences. I've done some really stupid things and lived to tell the tale. I mean, that's part of what getting old's about. You survive.
That's some wisdom there. Yeah, when you survive the tales. I used to look at all the these older hippies and older cats that would still be in the music scene and just think I wanted to be like these guys, because I saw that as you aged, you either fell out or got in trouble or had issues along the way. So I wanted to be one of the old gray ones with their dreads falling out, standing on the back of the at the back of the arena. Hopefully I'm still on that path.
I mean, Rob, for what it's worth, the one thing I really continue to be truly grateful for in my path is all of these crazy, even my bad decisions have led me along a path where I've been fortunate enough to connect with truly exceptional humans. I mean, I've got folks that, I have friends of mine that we met at Emerald's 30 years ago, and we're still, we're still in contact on a semi-regular basis. And, these are the relationships, these connections that you form. And, I kind of keep coming back to the whole cultivation and planting seeds thing, because that is the metaphor I live in.
Right. It's just a nested multi-use metaphor at this point when it comes to spreading that knowledge and trying to connect.
It's the Ganjier path, my man. We are planting seeds. We are building relationships. We are cultivating, we're cultivating knowledge for folks.
Right. Really, and in some cases, even showing them where there's whole libraries of knowledge, or maybe they didn't realize it, or after they've
Absolutely.
gotten past that stage of fun and overconsumption. In quotes, I'll say, because everyone is different on their levels of consumption.
Or introducing each other to those things. I mean, some of the case in point, 1 o'clock, we do that continuing education call every Monday. And I'll tell you, some of the guest speakers they've had in there have been phenomenal. I'm not positive. I think they're doing is it a regenerative farming or sports medicine today? I'd have to go back and look, but there's one coming up with Ricky Williams that I'm so excited about. I can't stand it because I'm a New Orleans Saints fan,
Yeah, that'll be sweet. I mean, I'm actually there's a Chamber of Cannabis event here in Las Vegas. Shout out to the Chamber of Cannabis. We're trying to get them on a future episode. But Ricky Williams is coming out to talk with the whole group and the Chamber and kind of talk about his journey, kind of removing the stigma as well. He seriously ran into it with
big
the
time.
NFL.
Big time. I mean, and that's, I want to say, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the way that he has, the way that he has stood his ground. That was a guy who took a step back and kind of looked at his values and what was important to him and what he wasn't okay with, and made some pretty fucking hard decisions based on that.
Yeah, definitely. And with everything on the table and the decisions he had to make, it's another professional thing to just quit a job. If it's a high paying NFL kind of job as well, it's a whole nother can of worms. I think
that's a big cliff to leap off of. Yeah,
for sure, man. And what we were talking about before with some of the psychedelia, I think, and cementing your virtues or what you find valuable. It's those kinds of decisions that I think that like a little microdose or a little bit of more of a thoughtful evening would really steer you in the right direction. That's where I hope that industry is going to push it towards.
Rob, that's really a great connection to make when you segue directly from a microdose to a thoughtful evening. At the end of the day, the microdose is simply a tool. It really is about helping us as human beings to be more mindful, aware, and deliberate about what we're doing. Because, you can't ever, any decision, as long as you're willing to accept the consequences for it, isn't necessarily a bad one. It might not be, the consequences might not be ideal. But if you're willing, as a human, if you're willing to own your consequences, from there you get lessons and hopefully don't repeat those mistakes. You go on to make exciting new mistakes.
Yeah. Right, you can build up that confidence in choosing for yourself as well. I think that it's interesting that the industry itself has sort of stepped away from that like cannabis use as a journey paradigm, almost because that can be inapproachable for like a busy like 9-to-5er who's never been in the cannabis industry. Yeah,
commitment issues, 100%, dude. It's like, oh, that sounds like a lot of fucking work. I don't know about all that.
So just eat these gummies, you'll be fine.
Well, I love you. Yes, I mean that's some of the folks I work with. It almost kind of comes down to that. And I mean, when I'm talking to them, I mean, I we'll have the conversation about why, but I know damn good and well that it's going in one ear and out the other, and they're nodding, and I'm like, okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get your CBD tank topped up. We're gonna get you on a regular CBD regimen and start there. I need you to take one of these a day. We're gonna talk again in 14 days. And you sometimes I have to use that kind of approach, and my results continue to be excellent. Don't get me wrong, but
right,
dealing with
you
folks
gotta
like
meet
my
them
mom,
where they are.
My mom's 85. I love her to death, but she was born in Kansas.
Nice.
She's from Chanute. I mean, we lived in Topeka for a little bit when I was a kid, but Here's what I will say about folks that seem to have, Kansas dirt in their blood. They can be very, very stubborn when they set their heels.
Oh yeah, it's definitely part of the family and the state traits there.
Yes, yes. It's been an interesting journey with Mom for sure, but
that perseverance though.
well, if it's coming from a place of authenticity and sincerity, compassion, love, care for the human race, whatever the hell you want to call it, whatever label you choose to put on it, if it's coming from a real place, that persistence will generally win. I mean, there's a reason water cuts rock.
Right. I think that's an excellent note to wrap up this call today, David. And thank you so much for coming on the show today and dropping some wisdom on us. I think you're much more than just a guy, or we're all just that guy, because I've really enjoyed learning from you and looking at different parts of the industry together here. Where can folks find out more about you online or connect with you and talk Ganjier and the cannabis journeys?
Honestly, probably the best place to track me down right now. I'm currently planting my own seeds and kind of getting my ducks in a row with several projects. It would probably be through Instagram, Fog Buddha on Instagram. Would probably be the easiest way to connect. Or if they wanted to hit me up via email, I'm always or LinkedIn. I am always open to conversation. Especially with human beings. I can tell you this, Rob. I appreciate you I don't think you have any idea how much I appreciate you as a human being. The opportunity to connect with you when we were in California really helped kind of get me centered and allowed me to be successful. And I truly appreciate having had the opportunity to meet you in the first place and the chance to reconnect. And the one thing I will ask is this. Sometime in the next 2 weeks, how about we hang out on Discord and sesh?
Yeah, we definitely need to get that in. I can agree. We'll get something on the map.
Deal.
Yeah, thank you, David, man. Appreciate it.
Check.
Thank you for listening to the Apartment 113 podcast. For more information about the show and our range of services, visit apt113.com. We offer cannabis operation, consulting, agile product management, and connoisseurship services. With over a decade of experience in the cannabis industry, Apartment 113 is here to help.